It's time for This Week in WordPress, episode number 243, entitled Nathan Did Not Find a Dinosaur. It was recorded on Monday the 27th of February 2023. My name's Nathan Wrigley, and I will be joined, as always, by some notable WordPress guests. I'm joined this week by Paul Halfpenny, but also by Samantha Miller. It's a WordPress podcast, so what do we talk about? Well, WordPress mainly. WordPress 6.2 Beta 3 is just around the corner, and I'm going to be hosting a walkthrough with Anne McCarthy and Rich Tabor. Find out how you can get involved in that. It's all going to be held on Zoom this coming Thursday. We also talk about the fact that MemberMouse, the plugin, has been bought by MemberPress. There's an interesting article by somebody who I couldn't identify called Betrayed by WordPress. Are you clinging on like they are to PHP? We also get into the whole topic of tech layoffs and whether it's affecting you and what you can do about it, where you can go and find support and so on. WordPress London is coming back. WordCamp London, I should say. It's coming back this year, 2023, in September. Hopefully, the organisers will get some survey details out of you to make that show as good as possible. Meetup.com have bowed to the accessibility pressure that the WordPress community put on them. Go and see what that's about. We also talk about the fact that you can flatten your WordPress websites, and Patrick Posner did a podcast episode with me discussing all about that. And we talk about Kadence 3.0, the big update. It's all coming up next on This Week in WordPress. This episode of the WP Builds podcast is brought to you by GoDaddy Pro, the home of managed WordPress hosting that includes free domain, SSL, and 24/7 support. Bundle that with the Hub by GoDaddy Pro to unlock more free benefits to manage multiple sites in one place, invoice clients, and get 30% off new purchases. Find out more at go.me/WP Builds. Hello there, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, welcome, depending on where you are in the world. Very nice to have you with us, really appreciate it. This is This Week in WordPress 242. Goodness me, it's like we should have run out of things to say about WordPress hundreds of episodes ago, but there you go. It's the CMS that keeps on giving. We are joined this week by two people, neither of whom have been on this show before. Sadly, the marketing materials that we were putting out had Jess Frick's name on. Get well soon, Jess, is all I need to say. She's not feeling very well, and so she's pulled out of today's show. But we've got these two fine people joining us. First of all, Samantha. Now, Samantha, I do apologise. I never asked in advance. Is it Mueller?
It's Miller.
Oh, for goodness sake. I do apologise. Miller, that's interesting because it's got that sort of Germanic look to it.
At my wedding, my maid of honor mispronounced it as well, so it's totally fine.
I feel less bad. That's not quite so bad. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully this won't be the first and only time. Samantha is the content marketer at Nexus. We've had lots of people from Nexus on before. She's a WordPress dabbler and a world-class pet namer. Right, I've got to drill down on those. Firstly, what is a WordPress dabbler?
I've been using it since I was in high school.
Oh, nice.
I wouldn't consider myself an expert, but I know enough to get around, and I've had many accounts.
Yes, yeah. Well, that'll do. It's always nice to get a different perspective, so I appreciate you coming on. But what's this pet naming thing all about? Have you got many pets?
Not currently, but I give them the best names.
Oh, nice. Go on.
I have two min pins. The older of the two is Ziggy Woofdust. And our younger one, whose spirit matches her name, is Stevie Licks.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, as in licks. Okay, got it. Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's marvelous. Well, I really appreciate you coming on today. Hopefully, like I said, it won't be the first and only time. Also joining us today, we have got Paul Halfpenny. How you doing, Paul?
Very well, thank you. You pronounced it right. Well
yes, done. Yes. Yours is more straight, unless it's Powell or something like that. Yeah, Paul have Bernie.
I get halfpenny quite a lot because
right,
in
okay. Halfpenny.
Yes. Halfpennies,
yeah,
so
of course, yeah. Well, Paul is joining us. He was actually on a podcast episode that I did recently. I was just saying to Paul prior to pressing record, his voice is totally in my head at the minute because he's been in my ears for the last little while. But Paul is the CTO at Filter, which is a remote-first digital agency that specializes in open source tech, such as WordPress, Laravel, React, React Native, and Ionic. The team there works on WordPress sites for clients, including, check this out, this is cool, Crystal Palace FC, which is a major football club over here, Medivet, Ennismore, Thistle, and major clients we're not even allowed to mention. In 2022. He talked secret. Go on, you were going to say.
No, they're all secret.
Oh, okay, yes. You must kill the messenger if we mention. In 2022, he talked at Porto at WordCamp EU. He also was there at WordCamp US in San Diego. He's also a massive, and I've got this on good authority, a massive fan of Depeche Mode, and apparently they've got a new album coming out. He also likes to dabble in Star Wars and Disney, and he's just returned from an epic 2.5-week Christmas stay over there. So, okay, if Depeche Mode played in Disneyland, is that...
I mean, I haven't even considered that.
No, I bet they haven't either somehow. What's the fascination with Depeche Mode?
Enjoy the Silence, 1990. Came out, I was 15, perfect time. Wasn't really into music until that point. That hit, that was it. Since then, it's just got worse and worse, to be honest.
It's interesting because I was a massive music fan, and much less so since I got older. But I never sort of coalesced on one band as the thing. It was always like a bit of this and a bit of that. And it's interesting when you meet people who just like, it's like the Elvis fan. When you see people going to those sort of Elvis shows, you think, have we moved on? Do we all have to keep listening to Elvis? And I'm not leveling that charge at you, but is there ever a moment where you go, do you know what? Maximum Depeche Mode has now been reached?
I find it just get worse as I get older. And I think somebody in the comments just said they're touring. They start tour next week, next month.
Well, that is peach.
We've got our tickets booked and albums out. And the most exciting thing, I think, was they released a new single a couple of weeks ago, and we listened to it and we went, these guys are 60, and that's really good. And so I'm happy, that they released something that was still great, and I can keep loving them forever.
Oh, that's so nice. It's like a comfortable pair of shoes or something like that.
It very much is. Yeah. Costs a lot in box sets.
Yeah, thank you for joining us on the Depeche Mode podcast. We're not going to talk about WordPress today. It's all going to be about music. No, the person in the comments there is Peacher. She's been on the podcast several times. I do a monthly show with her all about UI and UX. So kind of thought that she might comment on that because she seems to like her music. We've got a few comments that have come in. Really appreciate it when people do that. Thank you very much. Lana is saying good evening from rainy Ukraine. It's 4 p.m. It's rainy here in the UK, and as if to keep the weather report thing going, Peter Ingersoll every single week drops in a weather report about where he is in Connecticut. So it's 9 a.m., mostly sunny in Connecticut. It's 32 degrees Fahrenheit or 0 degrees centigrade. The weather hasn't changed much, has it, Peter, in the last 2 months? Tonight, we are expecting our first winter storm of the year with upwards of 8 inches of snow. Peter, go and hide. Thank you, though, for leaving us a comment. I really appreciate it. And we've also got Courtney joining us, who says good day, with a nice morning coffee. Really appreciate that. If you want to make any comments, there are several caveats. The first thing is, the easiest way to make comments is to go to this page, wpbuilds.com/live. And if you're logged into a Google account, you're good to go because it's YouTube. It's a YouTube commenting system over there. But if you're in our Facebook group, there's a little step you've got to go through because Facebook disallow us to retrieve your username and avatar unless you go through this step. My understanding is you only have to do it once, and then if you don't clear your cookies from your browser, you're good to go. You go to chat.restream.io. That's the platform we use, /FB, chat.restream.io /FB. And once you've done that, click the authorize whatever button, and then we can see who you are. If you want to remain anonymous, that's fine too. Maybe just include your name in the post or something like that. Okay, right. Fine. We've got lots to talk about today. Firstly, I should say that we didn't get here last week because we had a summit on. We had the Page Builder Summit going on, which is now over. So we skipped a week. So some of these articles might not be like super brand new, shiny. They might be, 10 days or something old, but I felt that they were worth including. So let's get right to it. Let me share my screen. Let me just find the right one. Here we are. First thing, which we always do, is enormous amounts of self-promotion. This is our website, wpbuilds.com. If you fancy keeping in touch with what we do, fill out this little box here, include your email address, and we'll email you twice a week. That's basically it, telling you when we've got new content out. That's all I really want to say about that. You'll notice on here, though, that the podcast is supported by GoDaddy Pro. We'll be talking about them a little bit later, but appreciate GoDaddy Pro for all of their ongoing efforts on keeping the podcast going. It's been an amazing journey. Thank you. Good morning, says Michelle Frechette. Hello. Nice to have you with us, Michelle. Appreciate it. And let's get on to the first piece of WordPress news. This is WordPress 6.2 Beta 3 is coming around. And there's going to be a live demo on the 2nd of March. It's being aired on Zoom. You don't need to book for it. You just turn up, and Anne McCarthy and Rich Tabor will be on the call. I'm actually the moderator of that, and I'm a little bit nervous because I never use Zoom and I don't understand how to use Zoom. But hopefully between the three of us, we'll somehow get through it. But if you want to go and post your questions all about WordPress 6.2, then go to this article, WP Tavern. It was on the 22nd of Feb. It's called WordPress 6.2 Beta 3, released contributors to host live product demo on the 2nd of March. And there's a link in there where you can submit your questions. And there's also a link directly into the Zoom call at the appropriate time. My understanding on the 2nd of March, I think it might be 4 p.m. UK time. It could be 5 p.m. If I look at my calendar, I could tell you. But anyway, it's about then. And I'm looking forward to it. There'll be a bit of a laugh. I've never done it before, so that will be cool. And I'm going to ask Samantha and Paul if they're going to attend. And if not, why not?
Yes, of course we're going to attend.
Yeah, of course
yes,
you are.
Absolutely.
We'll never see you again.
No, but definitely. I think it's really exciting. It kind of end of phase 2, isn't it, with WordPress 6.2? It's on to the next thing. There
is going to be a large amount to talk about. I think Anne and Rich have got a lot in the pipeline. I mean, there's just so much going on. The finishing of full site editing being one of them, really. Yeah. Samantha, I was joking. You don't have to attend. It's totally fine.
Oh, no, I'm still relatively new to WordPress. I made the switch to marketing and in the WordPress sphere a little bit into the pandemic. I'm not from a WordPress background. So the more I can learn, the better. And I really enjoy the demos like this. Yeah,
it should be really good. They're apparently in the last little cycle, there's been 34 issues. You can see it on the page here. There's been 34 issues have been resolved. And the cumulative number of enhancements since the Beta 2 release is 292, which is really rather a lot. 354 bug fixes and counting. So there will be a lot to talk about. There's genuinely quite a lot of UI changes in there as well. So if you do want to keep up to speed, I mean, it's just a good way to get ahead of the curve. If you've got a bunch of clients and they are using, well, for example, things like blocks, there's a whole load of things changing around there. And obviously full site editing is coming to a close and the beta label is being ripped off it. So yeah, I'm just on a personal level, I'd appreciate anybody who does show up just to, mock me for being unable to answer questions.
I just want to see how you use Zoom and to make sure that you.
It's going to be it's not going to be good. Luckily enough, the WordPress team behind this, somebody reached out to me last week and asked if I was interested, and I said yes. This sounds great. And then it just suddenly occurred to me, really, the only way that I do these kind of things typically is on the tools that I use, and I've got all that muscle memory. I know where all the buttons are. So doing it all on an unfamiliar platform is scaring me a little bit. But they've been very kind. They've given me we're going to have a demo run through sort of thing tomorrow, where I can figure out how all the technology works, and so that's great. I feel really good.
And I think the way Rich talks about WordPress is really, really easy to understand. I I think I've told him a couple of times after I've watched talks that he's done, that actually he's great at presenting it in a really accessible way. And I think that anybody that's new to WordPress is a really good start for them to understand that.
Yeah, he's got a very calming way about him, hasn't he?
Very calm.
And he has the cleanest house I've ever seen. I've never actually been in his house, but when you look at the background, it's like, whoa.
I know what you mean.
Yeah, it's very nice. Courtney, who is very much involved in all of this kind of stuff, says absolutely suggest looking at the 6.2 post as well. Yes, it's the 6.2 beta post is linked here. Maybe I should just crack that one open quickly. Lauren Stein, looks like on the 21st of February. I presume this is what you're meaning, Courtney. If not, feel free to drop us a link and I'll put that one into the show notes, which go out tomorrow as well. But yeah, please come and join us. Have some questions prepared, and hopefully we'll get Anne McCarthy or Rich Tabor on the show. And able to answer some of those questions. That'd be great. There's a link. What does she say? There's a link in there, I think, for testing. Okay. Excuse me, I'm making this up on the fly. A link in the piece that I just opened and then closed again. Yeah, okay, Courtney. If you find it, let us know and I'll try and stick it on the screen. Okay. Right, let's move on. It seems like every heartbeat almost, we get somebody in WordPress buying something else in WordPress. Last year, 2021 and 2022 in particular, seemed like you couldn't wait, another week, another plugin has been acquired. This is an interesting one. I confess I don't really get involved in membership websites too much, but I've certainly heard of both of these companies before, because MemberPress have bought or acquired, I don't really know what the right word is, they've bought MemberMouse. Years ago when I joined WordPress, I was actually trying to build a membership site. That was one of the reasons that drove me towards WordPress, because there were all these membership plugins and I did need to do something. And both of these were players, more than sort of going back a decade, basically. But Blair has written this post saying that MemberMouse has joined the Caseproof family, then goes on to say that all Caseproof products, I'm guessing Blair is the owner of Caseproof, but it also seems from what I'm reading here, and to quote, not only that, MemberMouse, like all Caseproof products, is now part of the W Beginner Accelerator Growth Accelerator, led by Syed Balki. I don't know if that means this has been bought under the auspices of Awesome Motive, or if it's just some accelerator program that they're going under. Anyway, the two things seem to have lots and lots of overlap. So I don't really know how they're going to fit together. I don't know if they are. It sounds from what he's writing like they're going to keep the two things totally separate, which begs the question, why buy a very similar competing product if you're going to keep them separate? Don't really know, but just thought I'd mention it. I'll open it up to you guys. Do you get involved in member-y sites, member kind of LMS type things?
We've used some either that we've built ourselves, to do simple integrations or to use more complex ones. I think this one's really interesting because usually you see someone like Stellar WP, buying lots of different types of things that form a unit together, whereas this feels more like a vertical integration, doesn't it? Where you're buying almost something that exists in the same vertical as you, but it offers a different niche audience. So I think what Blair's talking about in that post is he's talking about their enterprise offering and it being great for enterprise and not maybe combining the products, but maybe taking the value from understanding what that team's been doing and building that into MemberPress. And that's a bit different from the usual acquisition model, right?
Yeah, I wonder because he does say just right here, actually, he says MemberMouse is a powerful enterprise-grade membership plugin. I don't actually know what that language means. I mean, I understand what enterprise is, but I don't know what the sort of killer feature or features in there, or if it's just a happenstance of history that MemberMouse has been bought by enterprise clients and there's something in there that they appreciate. Yeah, I don't really know. It says it's often mistaken for an online service rather than a plugin, which is kind of interesting.
I think it's an interesting move, even if it, just because it's that different type of acquisition that's taking place. I think it'd be really good to find out a little bit more, actually.
Yeah, it says it's our goal to optimize and expand. Eric Turnensen, I'm not sure if I've said that correctly, who is the founder, built it in 2009. Their goal is to optimize and expand that legacy, and we've got a passion to pull it off. Well, I mean, I guess if a membership plugin is going to be bought by somebody, then I guess if you're a MemberMouse user, at least it's been bought by a company that you know have got skin in the game and interested in carrying those kind of solutions forward. So, yeah. Samantha, anything about this, or should we move on?
No, you can move on. I don't have a lot of experience in this area.
Okay. I thought this piece was really interesting, although I am struggling to find out who it is. I love it when somebody implements a theme on WordPress which is so minimal that you can barely get an impression of who they are. The piece, I can't remember how it came to me, probably on Mastodon or something like that, but it's the URL is hirozed, HIROZED or ZED.me. And this just really struck me because it seems to be something that I hear occasionally, but not necessarily written down. The post is called Betrayed by WordPress. And if you're listening to this, whether it's today or in subsequent days, I'd be really interested to know what your thoughts are. They're obviously a developer, PHP developer, going back in the day, because they mentioned right at the outset of this very short article how much they enjoyed using WordPress as a CMS, particularly because it was the foundation of it was built on PHP. And I just love this. There's this three points to why PHP and WordPress are cool. It says PHP makes sense to me. Number one, where's the data? Number two, what do I do with the data? Number three, this is true. Plunk the data in between some markup. You're done. That's it. That's how it all began. And now he's basically saying, look, now it's all JavaScript and everything's hard in JavaScript. Everything's difficult in JavaScript. I don't know how many times I've tried to debug things in JavaScript and it doesn't debug in the way that I want it to. And basically I'm stuck. The piece is, give me the old WordPress back. Can we just rewind the clock, please? Can we reset? And I know, for example, Paul, I know that your agency, you haven't stuck with all of this, have you? You've got into the new hotness and you've got React and all of that written in your little testimonial at the beginning, which I read out. Not testimonial, your little bio. and so I'm imagining that you're going to disagree with this. Maybe there's maybe I don't know.
I don't necessarily disagree. I have a lot of sympathy for people that are being forced down a particular pathway and feeling like they're being sent somewhere else, and they've got to learn this new language and they've got to deal with the really fractured landscape that is JavaScript. There's loads of different frameworks, there's loads of different ways of doing things. Things move very quickly. I can see how that's a problem. I think the word betrayed is an interesting phrase. Like, I would maybe piece it as maybe feeling left behind, perhaps, in terms of the direction that WordPress might be taking and some of the things that are happening. But I think that there is a sense that some of the things that are happening, particularly as we move forward with, the phases of WordPress as we go forward, can only be delivered with JavaScript right now. So collaboration being phase 3, workflows, is there a way to do that server-side with PHP? And it may be easier to do that with. But, I know it's been a contentious issue in the community for the last couple of years. But, we recognise the signs pretty early on, and when actually this is the way it's going, and then we've tried to upskill our team to help them achieve that. And actually we still have a mix of people, and sometimes we're doing PHP in WordPress and JavaScript in WordPress as well, but also PHP with Laravel, and that community is very strong as well. So Laracon's just been on the last week, and there's been a really strong turnout for Laracon. So I think there are places for people to go. I'm not suggesting that they leave WordPress, but I think that there's room for all of those technologies and those frameworks there. But I think technology moves on, right? We're not using HTML1 anymore. And CSS has moved forward a little bit in those times as well. So I think stuff does move on, and I think you need to, you probably want to adapt. I know that there's lots of people still earning loads of money by writing COBOL because nobody understands COBOL anymore, because they're the last few COBOL programmers left in the world.
Yeah.
Yes, but they're earning loads of money. So maybe stick with it as long as you can. And then
Yeah.
in
Yeah,
10
your
years'
earnings will probably
time,
drop, but then in a decade or
go
something,
back
it'll just
up.
shoot right up
Yeah,
because there'll be
because you need
nobody left.
PHP programmers.
It's fascinating to me, actually, that WordPress has maintained its PHP roots for so long in an unwavering, backwards compatible way. Prior to using WordPress, I was a big fan of Drupal. And one of the reasons that I got really a bit tired of Drupal was that every time they came out with a point release, so the equivalent of WordPress 3, 4, 5, and so on, they would not honor backwards compatibility. They would just hop to the next technology, which they felt was going to do the next couple of years. And whilst that was great, it did mean that every time a major version of Drupal dropped, so every 18 months, 2 years, you had to begin again, new templating engine. They dropped Symfony in there at one point, and for me, it was just a little bit too much to keep going. So I can understand where the person from this article comes from.
Yeah.
But it also means that maybe WordPress has been so backwards compatible for so long that it does mean that a lot of people have become really comfortable in their workflow. And so when finally the JavaScript shoe dropped, it was a bit of a sudden shock. That's not quite true, though, is it? We've had several years to sort of warm up to this.
We've had a while. But I'm interested in what Samantha thinks, actually,
Yeah.
because WordPress just isn't all about, not all WordPress users are developers. WordPress users are content creators, right? So from a content marketing perspective, I don't know if you see some of this development stuff under the hood, but what do you think about the interface and how it works?
I haven't come across this particular argument before. And I as someone that doesn't work in the back end, I don't think I can fully appreciate the impact of what this change means. But, I get annoyed when things change as well. Like every time there's a subtle font change on my phone, I'm just like, ugh.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure how it impacts me as someone that uses it primarily for content creation. But in a more philosophical, I guess, way of thinking about it, I think it is important to continue to learn and adapt to a new style of working, because I'm doing that in a different way now. So I get it, and I agree to a point that it sucks, but at the same time, there's room to learn.
Yeah.
Personal growth.
It would be. I guess it would be akin to, I don't know, going to school in English or something. All the teachers are speaking English, and suddenly you show up one day and the curriculum's now all taught in French. You've suddenly got to get a grip of French before you can start to move on with your education, and that is, in effect, what's happening. If you are hoping to develop on top of WordPress, you now have to have PHP, which is the language of its history, plus HTML, CSS, and now JavaScript, but also some fairly new versions of JavaScript, shall we say? And there's a lot of people who, it's a struggle to learn that stuff. They've got enough on their plate just dealing with the client work that they've got. The idea of finding tons of time to learn something new like that is hard. Paul, in your agency, did you sort of self-educate yourselves one at a time, or did you guys put like a program together or buy a course, or how did you even manage it?
It's really interesting because some developers learn in different ways. So
Yeah.
I'm very much a learner by doing. So kind of, sink or swim or find something to do. And we certainly have a couple of developers that already have the ability to learn as they do something. So it's more like finding the right project or task, doing an introduction, and then getting the senior devs to help out the slightly more junior ones, or the ones that are newer to JavaScript, to go, okay, this is the way that we want to do things, and then helping them that way. But we tend to learn on the job, or find discrete projects or like side projects and go, right, go away and go and try and do this in JavaScript, and then we'll find out how to upskill them that way.
From a business point of view, there must be quite a lot of dead time is really the wrong phrase, and it's not the phrase I'm looking for, but it'll do. Time, because that sounds like quite a lot of fun. Oh, let's figure out a project where we can, but also it's not necessarily turning the cog of profitability. It's not printing the money at those moments. So that must be quite hard.
It is. Agency is a bit peak and trough, to be honest. So you have those really high, busy periods, and then actually you just suddenly find, oh, we've got almost a week free. This is fantastic. But what are we going to do in that week? So yeah, I think the value of agency and the best thing about agency is you get to work on a number of different projects. You would all get thrown at you with all different requirements and different solutions. And that allows us to experiment a bit more. And what we do is we kind of sort of build in some of our timelines when we're developing work to go, well, actually, we'll add another 2 weeks to this project, not because we want to get it done, not because it's taken longer to get done, but what we'll do is we'll spend some time learning as part of that project, and we'll accept that we will be developing this additional thing that we've never done before, and we'll give ourselves a bit of extra grace to do that. So
Nice. Yeah, really interesting. I just thought it was quite a nice piece. Yeah, maybe betrayal is the is the wrong word, but it's what they chose. So if you are in fact the person who wrote that blog piece, I'd love to know who you are. That'd be great. Thank you so much. Okay, let's move on. Okay, this is the topic of our time at the minute. I feel like 2 years ago it was COVID, right? Nothing about COVID. Everybody talking about COVID. Now it's layoffs and the cost of living crisis and all of that kind of stuff. So this is a piece. We got quite a few today from the WP Tavern. So we'll just say one great big thank you to Sarah Gooding for putting so many good pieces out in the last little while. But yeah, she's basically drawing attention to the fact that really up until pretty recently, lots of the big tech companies that we've all heard of, the Googles and the Peloton, she mentioned here, Stripe and various others, have been shedding staff. And the numbers have been pretty eye-watering, actually, when you get to the level of Google, who lay off, literally a small town's worth of people in one hit. It's catastrophic. But WordPress itself and the wider WordPress ecosystem really did seem to be immune to that. And of course, time and tide and all that. We now seem to be in a period where that is happening. GoDaddy, amongst others, announced a few layoffs. And then, as this article says, quite a few different companies were sort of laying people off as well. DigitalOcean and Cloudways laying people off. And I just wondered, firstly, from Samantha's point of view, I don't know how it is for you, the sort of content marketing side. That seems to be one of the pieces of the jigsaw which gets called into this conversation. It seems to be a lot of the content marketing side of things that seem to get the first wave of the layoffs. And I don't know from where you are on the Nexus side if you've experienced any of that, or if you guys have been completely immune to it.
So far, we've been immune. I've seen a lot of it on Twitter. I'm following the many people that are expressing their feelings on it. It's bad. To some degree, I guess I would have expected it, because a lot of companies ramped up at the beginning of the pandemic to meet demand, and kind of like seasonal workers in retail, when that boom isn't there, stuff like this happens. But you mentioned the cost of living crisis, and in America, the poverty line, the federal poverty line, has not actually changed. Like the formula for determining what is in poverty hasn't changed since the 60s. So when stuff like this happens, I think that the people that are hit for the first time in experiences like this, it's almost more than devastating. And I would like to think that with how WordPress works in general, there's a lot of opportunity to recapture opportunities on your own. But it's so hard when it seems like so many people are doing that. And when the industry is getting hit like this in so many different larger companies, it kind of feels like the end of the .com boom. When it's just depressing, and I'm going to go off on a rant if you don't stop me.
You're welcome to go off on a rant if you like. Yeah, I know what you mean, that whole kind of bubble thing. During COVID, I didn't really get a sense that people were over hiring. I just got a sense that the world has changed. Everything's gone online and is going to stay online from now on. You know, we're all going to be doing Zoom calls forever and a day. And even if office is open, we'll still be doing the Zoom calls because it's, you know, the economics of offices have shifted and so on. And it really seems that everybody's belts have tightened. Lots of people getting laid off, but also lots of people getting laid off at more or less on the exact same week does make that puzzle really difficult, doesn't it? Because if you've got, I don't know, let's say 1,000 WordPress people suddenly all looking for what is probably a dwindling number of jobs, that makes the competition and the fear much greater. You know, 6 months ago, there were so many people vying for the one job, and now it must be so many people times X vying for the same number of jobs. So it must be, it must be really, really disappointing. I know Michelle is on this call. Oh, look, as if by magic, she literally put the the comment in. She actually posed this question to Matt during WordCamp Asia. You can find that on the Q&A section. But also, Michelle, I think it's right. Am I right in saying that you are posting? I know you've got your WP career pages, but is there a place where you would guide people, Michelle, if they are facing redundancy? Because I know you do a lot of work in this space. So how's it going over at Filter, Paul?
Yeah, we haven't made any redundancies, and we're not looking. We don't need to, which is amazing for us. You know, we're very lucky. We experienced quite a period of growth last year, but we tend to hire quite slowly, and we tend to be quite sure and want to be quite sure before we take people on that is the case. I think there's a couple of things going on, isn't there? There's obviously a rebounding back. It's like with COVID, you have that elastic band and it's coming back a bit, and suddenly, you know, people are tightening their belts. I think it's interesting that so many companies are doing it all at the same time, and they all seem to be getting rid of 7%. You know, it's a strange figure, isn't it? You know, you're picking off a certain amount of people, and obviously those, you know, they're not doing it for this earnings call. They're doing it for the earnings call in a year's time, when that actually filters down through their P&L. Because a lot of people, fortunately, have been getting decent severance packages, and I think that's the most important point. But you look forward 3 months when those severance packages have ended, and that's the job, isn't it? If people haven't found jobs by then, you know, they might be in a bit more trouble.
Yeah. The runway is not that long, is it? I think in the article it mentions a typical severance package being something like 6 weeks plus a week for every, I don't know, year or 2 years or whatever it is that you have been involved in. So that does quickly dwindle. Michelle is out getting a link. She's going to try and find the link to that. That would be great. Thank you for that. But also, Peacher, I confess I didn't see the comment that was made by Matt, but it sounds like you didn't regard it favorably. So this is in response to Michelle saying that she asked Matt about this problem. And she says, you did ask that, Michelle, and his reply was disappointing, to say the least. Peter, if you're able to, tell us what, you know, in a few words, what was it that he said, and why was it of disappointment? I imagine it was something along the sort of open source side of things. But yeah, lots of companies cutting jobs at the same time, especially companies, it mentions organizations like XWP and Human Made, who I don't think have had this experience in the past. Paul, in your bio at the beginning, your agency Filter, the first words that you say about it was that you are a remote first digital agency. Now that speaks volumes to what we were just talking about, like Zoom calls and things. But have you always been that way, or did you shift and stay shifted?
No, we shifted during COVID. So I think it was literally April, March 2020 when we were all told to go home. I think we were shifting that way anyway, to be honest. I was going into the office less and less because I wanted to spend more time with the family. I wanted to spend more time at home, and that commuting time, whilst very useful to watch films, was, and catch up on, and I've done less of that since. It just seemed like a waste of time, having to go out so early and come back so late at night, and the pressure you put on your partners to deal with the kids when you're doing that kind of thing. And I just felt less and less need to be in the office. So we went remote first, and it's tough. Like, it's as tough as having an office in some ways. the people that you can hire are, you've got a wider pool of people you can talk to, and I think that's absolutely fantastic, and that's helped us because we now have people, in Edinburgh, in Poland, in Turkey, as well as people that live around London in the UK. But commuting into London is expensive, and I think having the ability to give people time to look after the kids, to do drop-offs, to do pickups when they're ill at school, to be able to drop all that stuff at the last minute when you're working remotely is so important. But I think it's really, go back to the transparency of some of the posts around layoffs, because I don't think I've seen that before. So I know like the last recession was probably 2008, maybe, with the banking crisis. We had a bit of social media back then. I remember I was on Facebook back then. But I think the transparency is something that's really surprised me in terms of people talking about that kind of thing. And I think what Michelle's doing with her list and what they're doing on post status, because they're giving free membership to people that have lost their jobs, and I think that's amazing, because I think there are people still hiring out there, and it might be that there's really great opportunities that you may not have realised because you weren't necessarily looking. So I think it's a terrible time. I'm not sure it ends quickly either, but hopefully the recession is shallow, and we can kind of get back to some sort of sense of normality instead of seeing these headlines every week.
Your move to going digital, remote first, Paul, did that? Do you think that saved you enough money to weather the current storm? So you lose all the offices and all of the high rent that you probably would have been paying for that, and everybody's combined pockets is shelling out for rail travel and all of this kind of stuff. I'm guessing, given the fact that you haven't laid anybody off so far, that really proves to have been a very clever decision with hindsight.
Nothing's done cleverly. When you take a decision, and if it works, you look great, and if it doesn't, you look terrible. It's like, we made the right choice. I wouldn't say that it had that much impact in terms of money saving, to be honest.
Okay.
What I would say is that it's allowed us to be more productive, and I think that's the key. And I think we've been able to get better people, because I think there's people in our business now who wouldn't work for us if we were still in London, because they wouldn't be commuting all that way into London, and they wouldn't even be looking for jobs in London. And I think that's the best thing for me, is being able to look elsewhere outside of that kind of small, narrow, Soho, which is where we were based, which is lovely, by the way. I'm not like, we had brilliant times. We worked in Covent Garden, we've worked in Soho. That is really, we always look back and say, at the time we were saying we're going to look back on this and find it amazing. Tell our kids we used to work in Soho, on Wardour Street, and it was buzzy, and you're going out after work and things like that. But actually, I think you get to an age as well where you're not out drinking every night. And if you do go out drinking every night, you're probably not going to do it for another week, because that's how long it takes you to recover. Right? Yeah. So, but we're going back in on Friday this week. We've got an all-company social down in the middle of Soho on Berwick Street. We're all going out for dinner, which would be great to see people in the flesh. We see them on screens all the time. Yeah, but in the flesh,
it makes those events a bit more interesting, doesn't it? I guess
it does. Yeah. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, nice. Samantha, I'm guessing that you're at home, just judging by the sort of backdrop.
Oh yeah,
Has that always been the way with you and Nexus? Have you always been at home?
Yes.
Nice.
The primary motivator for me looking for a job is that I wanted to work remotely. And this worked out really nicely. And I've not met any of my coworkers in person, which is weird to me, but at the same time, pretty cool. And like you said, if not for this shift, we wouldn't have some of the people working with us. And I'm 100% one of those people. I worked in office for 5 years as a grant writer, a couple of blocks from my house, and this was just the right move. And I'm in a much more interesting job where I get to flex the skills I have.
Michelle's giving you the thumbs up there. She says we love Samantha, which is really nice. I'm gonna get to the comments about what Matt Mullenweg said. So there's two comments have come in. One is from Michelle herself, who asked the question. She said he basically encouraged everyone who'd been laid off to sharpen their WordPress skills, market themselves as freelancers to build a portfolio, and encourage local businesses to get on WordPress. Okay. And then Peacher, who I asked to respond, said it was advice that felt so out of touch with the real world situation where people are at the top of their profession game. Top WP pros were laid off anyway. Nothing to do with their skills. Yeah, it's tough, isn't it? If you were caught up in that 7%. Michelle, if you do find that link to where you've been posting WordPress jobs, that'd be great. Thank you. But don't worry too much. It's not the end of the world. But thank you for that. Okay. Wow. What an interesting topic that was. That kept us going for a bit, didn't it? Let's move on and we'll talk about accessibility. A little while ago, meetup.com, which is the website, it's a service. And I don't actually think it's directly got anything to do with Automatic or anything like that, but it's the service that all WordCamps and WordPress meetups are basically required to use in order to organize their meetups and so on, and all of that, ticketing and stuff. It was figured out that, well, they basically put an overlay onto their website, and given the commitment from the WordPress project to make things as accessible as possible, I won't go into the whole debate about it, but essentially if you believe that sticking an overlay on your website is going to make you entirely compliant with all laws, then you probably need to rethink that. So the argument went something like this: well, we're all forced to use Meetup. It's got this horrific accessibility problem. Can we force them to do something about it through the arena of public pressure? And it looks like the answer is a verified yes, which is great. So again, Sarah Gooding writing on WP Tavern, meetup.com follows through on commitment to improve website accessibility. So rather than just sort of announcing that they were going to do something and then go quiet in the hope that nothing would happen, it seems like that's not the case. They employed, now, it was a company, I believe it was DQ, but I could be wrong about that. That's what's in my head. Which, oh yeah, there we go, perfect. They had a complete audit done, and that audit identified 732 issues that needed to be resolved. I don't really have any insight into, how fine-grained they were. In other words, were 10 of those super serious and 690 odd were just, little things that needed a tweak? I don't know. But approximately 40 of those are to do with color and contrast and design, and the remaining are things which need to be addressed more urgently. And they're going to get on and do it. They've got 2 phases designed to complete this work. And so hopefully within the next period of time, I don't remember if any period of time was mentioned, WordPress will have had a bit of a difference on meetup.com. And so people who are using, assistive technologies and screen readers and things like that will be able to access WordPress events, which is like super important. So I'm just going to open this up to either Samantha or Paul if they want to comment on this. I think this is all good news.
Yeah, I think accessibility is so important. We're doing some work on accessibility right now. We've got a guide, little handbook going out on about it that we've co-authored with an agency called Web Usability. They're one of our partner accessibility agencies that we refer into our clients and work with. We also work with AbleDocs as well from a document management point of view, making sure their stuff works. And we see it's a real growing subject. A lot of people talking about it. Obviously, in the US, there's laws, and you can be sued if you don't have this in place. And we're not the experts in this, but we're aware of this. In the UK, it's more of a tap on the wrist right now. I think it's a like, can you go on and improve that, please? But we can't sue you about it. But I think it's becoming so much more important, and I think it's really important to talk about this. Websites have become so complicated and difficult to use in some ways, with lots of interactivity, lots of designs going on. And actually, I think I'm really lucky. I don't have any particular accessibility needs. Although my eyes are getting much worse, and maybe I will in a couple of years, because you hit mid-40s and it's all downhill, right? But I think it's a subject we should be spending more time on. And I know when Gutenberg came out, there was a big discussion about accessibility within the block editor, how maybe that hadn't been at the forefront as they were developing things out. And I think that I think if my memory serves me correct, they address some of those concerns and we improve things. And I think it's incredibly important.
When we began the call, I mentioned we just so that you know, we typically just run through very quickly what all the articles that we're going to talk about are, and by pure coincidence and genuinely coincidence, this isn't some sort of contrived coincidence, your agency Filter released this Marketer's Guide to Web Accessibility. It sounds right up your street, Samantha, this. Marketer's Guide to Web Accessibility. This is hot off the press. This is today. Do you have any insight, Paul, into what this document is for or who it's intended for?
It's for businesses to help them understand what they need to put in place and how to address that. Sai and Joy from our end have been working with Web Usability, the agency that we partner with, to co-author that guide. So it's from both of us, but I recommend people just go and have a look at it. And if you don't want to fill in the form and give us your details, that's fine. Just let me know, and I'll send you a copy without you having to give us any details.
Yeah, thank you.
Just interested in having a conversation about it.
That's brilliant.
We'll be doing more work on We'll be sending out some more blog posts, I'm sure, over the next quarter about it.
I'll add that into the notes surrounding the meetup.com piece as well. Samantha, was there anything you wanted to add in there before we move on?
I agree with all of Paul's sentiments. I think it's super important that we continue improving accessibility, because I think many people that are not affected by an issue that would require assistance, we don't really think of it as something important sometimes. And, it's so easy to just not put in an alt text on a tweet for an image or whatever, for featured images. And a lot of it gets overlooked. And I'm so happy to see any improvement.
Paul, you were mentioning that the teeth, if you like, in the law in the UK maybe are not quite as long and sharp as they are in the US. Yeah. And this next piece, which will just sort of bump up the queue a little bit, this is on the iThemes website. It's called Website Accessibility Lawsuits Are Growing, How WordPress Sites Can Become ADA Compliant. ADA, for those of us in the UK and elsewhere, is Americans with Disabilities Act, and I'm guessing it's the legislation which governs whether or not you are going to be chased by lawyers or not. This is a really long piece, so I can't possibly cover it. I mean, so long is this piece, in fact, that it's got a table of contents at the beginning, which is always a bit of a warning, caveat emptor. Get into it at your leisure. But it's a really good piece. I read it from start to finish, and it really does lay out all of the bits and pieces that you need to be mindful of. Some of it, may come down the road slightly later. You've got work to do before that, and then there's bits about the low-hanging fruit. But this is a topic that I think is going to become more important as time goes on. So, Paul, from your point of view, you mentioned that in the UK, the teeth on those laws are probably less, they're not quite as serrated, shall we say. They're a little bit more blunt. But if you're building clients at Filter for, companies, institutions, non-profits, whatever, all over the globe, presumably that these questions are now getting asked of you, right? Before that contract gets anywhere near you, these kind of discussions are happening, and they want to know, look, we don't want to be chased by the ambulance chasing lawyer. Forgive me for using that phrase. It's probably a little bit out of place, but you understand the sentiment of it. We want to make sure that we've done everything that we can fight off a case. I'm guessing this is now as important as something like SEO, maybe more so even, I don't know.
I would totally put it in the same level as something like Core Web Vitals.
Right.
Which is what we've got people coming to us going, we need to hit green on all these metrics. And SEO is just as important as that. And I think it's not necessarily just about the content that on a web page. So, a really key area for us is documents and PDFs and whether they're accessible. We've been doing some stuff, I said, with Able Docs, and we've been looking at one of our clients who do a lot of work in PDFs for their employees. So they do operating procedures and things like that in their PDFs, and making sure that they're compliant. But then also because we don't just build websites, we build apps as well. So we look at how an app might be accessible, which is it's very similar because it's a website on a phone ultimately, isn't it? But there are things that we have been learning more about, and we I say we are on a journey as much as everybody else in this industry as to what's right. But I don't think we've not been in the situation, I don't think they have in the US, with companies in the US, where it is so important that it absolutely needs to be addressed. I don't think it's just the UK, I think it's the EU as well, where there's a slightly softer, less litigious approach to these things. But I think, from a personal perspective, it just makes sense. It's like I remember when I used to walk into work from the train station to Soho, Royal National Institute of the Blind, and at one point in their life, outside their building, they had a step down from the door, I think, to the office, and then they put a ramp there, and it was like, well, of course they need a ramp. Like, why would they not need a ramp? How's somebody in a wheelchair supposed to get up those steps? I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. And it frustrates me when people are like, oh, why are you spending money on ramps? But you've got to treat everybody, give them the same, no barriers to entry, and give them the same accessibility as anybody else.
Yeah, it's definitely more important. I'll just sort of run through some of the top level items on this piece. Essentially, what does it mean to have a WordPress ADA compliant website? And given that I don't know the name of the acronyms for the UK equivalents, I'll just stick with those. What are the possible consequences of not having one? I suppose that's the bit that maybe should come right at the top, because that's the bit that's going to put the fire in your belly. Then they give some examples of companies who really have had to, well, they got in there at the beginning, if you like. Target, a US company, which I believe is a bit like a Walmart or something like that. It's a sort of grocery shopping supermarket kind of thing. They got caught out and really got told off, and since 2016 have been pushing the forefront of this, and it turns out that it was one of the best things that they ever did. And then how to fiddle with your WordPress website to make these things possible, and there's some quick wins in there as well. Like I said, the article goes on for ages, loads of tools. If you're interested, there's always people in the WordPress accessibility Slack channel. I know that Michelle, who's listening to this, and Peacher both are very interested in this. So there's always people to reach out to if you're not familiar, especially if you're a freelancer and don't really feel that you've got the bandwidth to take a lot of this stuff on. There are channels that can help you. So just go into the make Slack for that. Yeah. Samantha,
I think that helped us. I think just finding somebody else who was more specialist than we were to enable us to help understand what we needed to do better.
Yeah. Anything to add in here, Samantha?
Not that I can think of. My experience with ADA is I helped write the civil rights compliance documents for previous jobs, and to be honest, I don't think we ever had anything outlined for websites. But then again, that was like 10 years ago. So.
Yeah, it really does feel like it's just in the last 24 months that this has started to pick up a lot of momentum, to the point where it's now become a real hot button article. 4 or 5 years ago, it was all core web vitals. Now it seems that accessibility is the thing which everybody is keen to get on board of, and honestly, why not? So that is iThemes, and I will link to that in the show notes. It's Dan Knaus, 23rd of February. So this one was from last week. Okay. This one is for me and Paul, I guess. WordCamp London. Yay. Yeah, indeed. Yeah, yes. I mean, from everything you've said, you were always right there anyway, so it wasn't like you had to go anywhere. For me, it's honestly, it's like getting to Berlin or something. It's just as bad from grimy North Yorkshire all the way to London. But I'm really excited about this. It hasn't been on for 4 years. and the organisers are in the early planning stages of figuring out what a WordCamp 2023 in London would look like. It looks like they've settled on a date in September. I don't know the exact dates, but September is going to be the month. But they have launched a survey, which you can find here. The URL is too long to say, so I will just link to it in the show notes. But needless to say, in the show notes will be a link to the survey. And they're interested in knowing what you want from this event. Obviously, having 4 years off, they're not caught up in that whole maelstrom of, well, let's just do the same thing again. They've got the capacity maybe to have some fresh ideas, different venue, different approach, different kind of talks. Even down to some of the questions are about how many people feel like an ideal event to you. I don't know if that's around the whole COVID piece, whether or not you'll feel safe if there's thousands. But last time it was run, there were 768 people in attendance, which is a pretty darn big event, actually. I mean, it's not massive, but it's not tiny either. And I think as far as WordCamps go, it was one of the bigger ones apart from the flagship Europe and what have you. So go and fill out that survey, basically. But I'm, whatever happens, I'm going to be there. What about you, Paul?
Yeah, me too. I'm definitely up for it. I think it's been great going to WordCamps again over the last 12 months. Gutted I didn't go to Asia. But I went to Porto, I went to San Diego, had a great time at both of them, and we're planning for Athens at the moment.
Are you?
Yes, so we are taking a bigger team to Athens this year, which is fantastic. So we want to talk to people and get people, at those talks and embedded in the WordPress community, really.
Are you going to be doing the sort of sponsorship thing, or do you tend to leave that to one side?
I don't think we've looked at it yet. I think as an agency, I don't know whether it suits us to do sponsorship. But I think we'll have a look at it.
And would you bring a big force to like the London one? Because obviously,
yes.
It sounds like 5 years ago, you probably all were fairly close to London, whereas now they're all over the place. It's probably harder to get everybody to London than it ever has been.
It is. I'd be really interested in the venue or where it might be held. I don't know if anybody knows London, but it's quite a big city. And it's quite an expensive city as well to stay in. I think what I really liked about Porto was the venue for Porto was just off to the side. It was walkable to a certain degree. And it was in the gardens and it was beautiful. And I really enjoyed that venue. And in San Diego, there was a hotel attached. So you can stay in the hotel and then just wander down.
It was all great, wasn't it? Yeah, I don't know. I speak regularly with some of the people who are organising WordCamp London, but I don't know much in terms of the venues that they're looking at. I do know that when they were trying to keep the WordPress London meetup going, and the cost of venues went absolutely bonkers. And I'm not just talking, that's a bit ridiculous. I'm talking orders of like 10x what you'd imagine to hire, let's say, the upstairs floor of a pub or something was, like eye-watering amounts of money. So I guess this is a big thing, but hopefully it can be all offset by the WordPress Foundation, who tend to stump up for these kind of events, which is really nice. Asia was just one block, says Courtney, between hotel and convention shopping mall. I so wish I'd been there. I really wish I'd been there. The National Harbour. What's this? Yeah. The National Harbour for WordCamp US Community Summit will be a hotel and convention. Has one location as well. Okay, so WordCamp US. Yeah, I don't know. I'll report back. I'll speak to the organising team, and next week we'll hopefully have a bit of an update. Maybe they've got a venue in mind. But it does sound like if they're asking for numbers, what's your ideal WordPress size event? Maybe they haven't decided on the venue yet, because presumably that would...
I guess you need to know that first, right? So that you can... my wife does events. She's very good at that sort of thing. It blows my mind, just the number of things that she needs to put on a checklist on a clipboard and walk around with. It seems like a massive undertaking to me. It's like it would be quite overwhelming. Anybody that organises WordCamps, I think my applause goes out to them, because
Yeah.
everything that I've been at so far has been incredibly well done.
Michelle, thank you, Michelle and Courtney and various others who keep making comments. That's really nice. I was at WordCamp US and was with Michelle, and the event didn't go quite according to plan in terms of the accommodation and the things like showering, and she wrote various blog pieces about that. But it sounds like, from everything she's written, that the WordCamp Asia team really pulled it out the bag, Michelle. So no similar experience, Michelle. It was like from start to finish a really great exercise. And did that include all of the bits that WordPress didn't touch, like the flights and the taxis to and from venues and all of that? It sounds like it did, but that's really cool. She also says she expects WordCamp US to be also. So we're sort of marrying a few things here, aren't we? Here we are talking about accessibility, and now we're talking about WordCamp events, and the two are now overlapping, which is kind of cool. She said, I showered. Yay! Yes. Flights and taxis were all good as well. Oh, this is great. And then Courtney Wright, did you see this? This was hysterical. Do you know a guy called Bob Don? He does a podcast called Do the Woo. And also there's a guy called Mark Westgard who owns WS Form. They took a cardboard cutout of my head on a stick and took it around various places at WordCamp Asia. And so there's me like with my head just sticking out of a potted plant, or like over the top of the Yoast banner. I won't bore you with them on the screen, but I literally spat my coffee out the first one I saw, because I had no idea they were doing it. And there must be like 20 odd pictures of me just in compromising places of WordCamp Asia. But just this bit here, it was really funny. You can find them on Twitter. But yeah, I know.
It's like a favourite teddy bear that they've taken with you on holiday, isn't it? Like,
very sweet. Oh, Cammy says she saw
Nathan went today.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it was hilarious. Honestly, can you imagine if it was your face? It would, like, there was mixture of shock and awe. It's like, hang on, wait, what? That's what? I looked at the first one and thought, oh, they've photoshopped it in. And then the more I looked at it, it was like, no, that's got shadows and everything. They've cut out a picture. But apparently Mark got it properly done from a sign writer.
A lot of effort's gone into it then. Like, more effort.
I know. Yeah. Wow. And there was one with Michelle. I was in her trolley on the front of her little machine that she goes around. There's a little like basket on the front. There was just my head. It was great. Very funny. Thank you, Mark, for doing that, and Bob. I really appreciate it. Right. Okay. We're running out of time. God, we can talk, the three of us, can't we? Right. There is on the screen, there's the survey, by the way. If you do want to go and fill it out, I will link to it. You can go and get that done. I wanted to mention this. This is slightly self-promotional, but I thought I'd mention it anyway. Well, it's not really. It's not about me. I recorded a podcast episode for The Tavern with a guy called Patrick Posner, all about using WordPress to create static sites. Can I just recommend that if you've never, ever thought about this? In other words, imagine the internet of 20 years ago, when if you wanted to create a website, you literally had to open up a text editor and write open bracket P close bracket, then write some text and write open bracket / P close bracket, and there was your paragraph tagged on. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Well, imagine that if you went out to find a web page, you literally found a static HTML file that somebody laboriously put together. Well, there's this movement which seems to be really getting a bit of groundswell at the moment of flattening your pages. So what Patrick's plugin does is it goes around your WordPress website after you finish creating posts and whatnot, and a bit like Google, it just scrapes the HTML, shoves it in a zip file, and then you upload it to something like Netlify, and it really does mean that you can shut WordPress down. Obviously, you can't do a lot of the dynamic stuff. You can't do forms. You have to figure out other ways of doing that. But it does mean that your site is very, very, very secure, because there's no PHP engine in the background or Apache or anything like that. But it also means that it's really quick. And I would just encourage anybody who's got a ton of brochure sites that don't really need a lot of maintenance, that just need to exist and keep up and be very cheap, The hosting costs alone are absurdly low, and I am literally talking 10 US cents a year per website for, modest traffic. So go and have a listen to this website. Patrick explains how his plugin works, how it does it. It's one of many ways of doing it, but it's very, very cool.
Miriam, it sounds, big movement in this, isn't there? And you can host it on S3. I mean, that's not going to cost you any money at all. It seems very similar, not totally similar to what Miriam was doing with Static.
Static, very similar.
Doing with Static.
Yeah.
Static has the dynamic elements, doesn't it? It gives you a static front end, but you can still post a form.
Static now. Yeah, they were bought out by Elemental, but basically the same thing. Only in this scenario, you just use. So I tried it and I used it with local. So I built the website on my Mac, and then exported the file, put it into GitHub repo. That GitHub repo then got consumed by Netlify, and the whole thing took about 10 seconds from the time of clicking publish in Patrick's plugin to it all being live. Is brilliant, really, really great. But like you say, just like Static, only there's no website bit. There is no website which spins up into life and then collapses itself when you shut all that down.
But it's so fast, really fast, because you just send in HTML.
Yeah, you're going to really struggle not to get a good Core Web Vitals score. I mean, you really are going to have to work hard to screw it up. But anyway, go and check it out. And if you want any thoughts on it, just contact me and I'll let you know what my experiment involves. I should make a little video about it because I think it's really fun. Okay, right, moving on. So it's AI. We always talk about AI now. And this project came along. It was Aaron and Josh from Imagine. We talked about their plugin a little while ago. They have a new thing called wp-docs.chat, and I'll just tell you what it's intended to do. It's powered by ChatGPT, I believe, and it says, I'm an AI chatbot that gives direct answers to your WordPress questions. I've been trained on all the official WordPress documentation, so that's, I think, the point. I might have missed the point earlier. And will do my best to answer your questions accurately and truthfully. So it's got to be about WordPress documentation. In other words, what they're hoping to do is shorten the journey from you having a WordPress documentation type question to finding the answer. So rather than going out to Google and probably, you know how that journey goes, you click 8 links and eventually you get onto the right one that probably was the one you wanted to click first anyway. And it's probably on Stack Overflow or something like that. And this, in theory, will allow you to do that more quickly. Does either of you have a question that we could try on it? Feel free to say, no, I don't, because I tried it earlier, but I misunderstood. I thought it was to build functions and things like that. So any of you two got a question for me?
Samantha, have you got one?
No, I haven't, but I did the same thing that Nathan did.
How about how do I create a block? Because
how
that's quite useful, isn't it?
A block? Right, let's try a block. How do I? Now that's an entirely different question, isn't it? Get into the realm of.
I wonder it's not coming back with any answers.
Okay, so here we go. We've tried Paul's question. How do I create a block? And it's obviously doing what it always does. It's spinning. On ChatGPT, you get this little nice visual sort of feedback as it does each word at a time. But on here, they've obfuscated all of that, so they just give us the answer, and it says you can create blocks in Markdown using the that's not very helpful, is it? Using the syntax quote 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 quote. For example, this is a block. No,
maybe not the answer we were looking for.
Let's try. What does theme.json do? Should we try that? Let's see if we get an answer to that. So that failed, but it does say, to be fair to them, it's ChatGPT. It does say at the bottom, ask me full questions. I'm not a search engine. Don't ask me install plugin. Ask me how do I install a plugin. It also makes the point that it gets things wrong from time to time. Whatever the worth of this is today, I still think this is one that might be worth bookmarking because presumably the AI will only get better. Okay, so in answer to the question, what does theme.json do? We seem to have more of an answer this time. It says, the theme.json file allows block theme developers to control the settings and styles of the blocks in the editor. It provides a central point of configuration whilst also providing a blah, blah, blah. I'm happy with that. That looks actually pretty decent, doesn't it? And then here's the killer bit, which I think is the most interesting bit. We get the sources underneath. So in this case, it has plagiarized. Is that the wrong word? It's consumed 3 sources here, all of which appear to be from Learn WordPress, learn.wordpress.org, and you can click on those and find out more for yourself. So maybe not all is lost. Chat WP.
I think the interesting thing about this is that a lot of the answers. So I was trying it out and trying different things, and I think a lot of the answers could be done with a search in the documentation. So where ChatGPT is supposed to shine is from scraping lots of different data from lots of different places, and then understanding the context and the relevancy between them to give you the right answer and to give you that detail. If you're only scraping the docs, then you're only going to get answers from that docs, which might be as well served from doing a normal search. Although arguably that means the docs will need to be searchable in the same place from the search input field, and
Yeah.
Courtney will tell us if that's the case or not. But
well, actually, Courtney posed a good question, which was, how do I create a navigation menu? Unfortunately, the website, I presume it's got some sort of cookie implanted in my browser now. I seem to have run out of queries. I think it's likely that I did 5, maybe 5 or 6, and it's now in effect timed me out. I don't have an OpenAI API key. But obviously, if you were into this and it was giving you some value, you can plumb that in the background and, pay as you go with ChatGPT in the same way that you can with this, ChatGPT on all sorts of other services. So unfortunately, how do I create a navigation menu is out of bounds for me, but it might not be for you. Nomad Skateboarding, hello. Says, I haven't gotten a useful answer yet trying it. The developer has been active and jumped into Make Teams to ask for feedback. Okay, that's cool. Yeah, that's good to know. And yeah, it's clearly not working for you yet. Okay, let's come back to it in a few weeks and see if we've got any movement. But you can contact the guys over at Imagine. It's their product. Ugly Robot is the name of their company, which is great, isn't it? It certainly seems to be
did
an ugly
Samantha
robot.
name that because she's good at naming, right? So
yeah,
ugly robot. That sounds like, is that something?
Marks out of 10 for Ugly Robot. Yeah.
Unfortunately, it was not me.
No, it's a good name though. I quite like it. In response to the previous thing about Patrick Posner's plugin, Cohen. Hello, Cohen. I use Jekyll for some of my sites in combination with GitHub Pages. It's great for simple sites, insanely fast and secure. Interesting. Yeah, I do like this whole flattening web pages movement. I think that's going to be a real thing in the weeks and months to come, especially as people are, trying to shave money out of their budgets. That seems like a really good way of doing it. Okay, so that was ChatWP. We got limited results, but that's the way it goes. Next up, we have got Kadence. This is a piece of plugin news. Kadence has gone from 2 point whatever they were at. They've flipped over during this week to Kadence Blocks 3. I believe it was Wednesday. It's a really long piece again because they've changed so much. We often have Kathy on this show, and she's been in charge of an awful lot of this in terms of the marketing and what have you. But Ben Rittner, the lead developer and founder of Kadence, wrote this piece, and there's loads going on under the hood. The first thing, I guess, is if you're a Kadence user, which I know a lot of our listeners are, they've changed an awful lot in the UI. So we've got this sort of tabbed interface now. If you're looking at the screen, you can see that they've divided all of their settings up into 3 sections. You've got general, style, and advanced, and you can see that working its way down on the image there. They've changed some of the ways that just some of the styles of the buttons that you click and things like that to have a more consistent approach. New updating settings, I quite like them. It all seems really clear, I've got to say. Where this border radius is going to happen looks pretty clear to me, and all of these UI things here look really clear to me. This is quite nice inside the block editor. They've added this visual cue to show you what padding you're going to get. And again, apologies if you're listening to this on audio, but those of you watching the video, you can see that this green area here represent, well, I say it's green, but you get the point. So it's got a tiny bit of padding, maybe like 10 or 20 pixels on the left and the right, and then it's got I don't know, maybe 80 or something on the top and bottom. Does it say? We'll come to that in a minute. And you can see it in real time. So if you are interacting not just with the UI in the block editor, but if you're interacting with the settings, it's going to show you that. So you're not surprised by, well, how come the word craft in this case isn't slammed right up against the top? You can see that, okay, it's the padding, and you can figure out where that padding's come from. So I think that's really nice. You can also move things around. They've started to use grid, and so you can move things left, right, like whole blocks can move left and right. And if you've got a series of blocks with inside inner blocks, you can move those around as well. And there's just a whole bunch of stuff. You can change the text within the block editor directly in the text itself on a certain subset of blocks, and a whole load more. One of the things which I quite like is that rather than a lot of the other alternatives where they go for you choosing pixels or rems or whatever it is that you want to go for, they've gone for this nomenclature of small, medium, large, extra large, 2 extra large, and 3 extra large just across the whole site. You can change that. You can say I want it in pixels, but just to keep things like clutter free, presumably for a subset of users who don't want to know all of that, you just say, well, just make every paragraph small, and it'll be whatever small is. So I think that's quite a nice thing. And they've introduced CSS clamp so that all of your fonts look groovy, no matter what you're looking at. You know, they'll be small on small devices, and medium on medium devices, and big on big devices. So a lot of work in there, and a bit of a bravo, really. Congratulations. I had a play, and I really liked it. Really, really cool. You must be proud, Samantha.
I am. I wasn't going to boast, but they're part of our family of brands. Love them.
Yeah, they've done really quite a lot of work this time around. I know the marketing has been probably in full tilt this week. Have you been involved in any of that?
Oh, no. Stellar is separate from Nexus, but
Okay.
I should know more of them. I pretty much know Michelle on that side.
Yeah. Yeah, Rob, thank you for joining us, Rob. Rob Cairns in Toronto says Kadence release is amazing. Yeah, I'd be curious to know, Rob, what you've done with it that you feel is amazing. I played with it. I've been, like I said, I was doing my summit last week, so I cracked it open at the weekend, had a very quick play, and then my children woke up, and that was the end of that. So didn't really get a long time. Oh, we're besties, says Michelle. Here's an interesting comment. Nomad Skateboarding. My fear with page builders is that they all claim to be lightning fast and then run major updates about how they're bringing the code up to speed. And Rob's back with a comment. I held off 2 new sites builds for this. Oh, curious. You actually held 2 back. Was it features that they were going to bring in that you thought were going to be worthwhile, or was it just that, you could postpone them so you did, so you didn't have to fiddle with, I don't know, telling clients about the new UI and what have you? Anyway, kudos to them. Right. Okay. Anything you want to add to that, Paul? Or
it looks like some of the stuff that they've introduced looks a bit like what Beaver Builder had. So we used to use Beaver Builder before the block editor came out, and we used to think it was excellent. And they had some patterns that looked quite similar to that, and it was really useful for those members of the team that weren't maybe doing it in code, or but would do it on the front end style. So I think that's great to see.
Are you all about the blocks then now? Is it always the block editor?
Yeah, we are all about the blocks.
Yeah.
We don't tend to use anything, but like we did use Beaver Builder previously. We liked it, but we do our own custom stuff on top of that as well. We are pretty much full in on the block editor now. We don't use any page builders because we want to be as close to core as possible to a certain degree. And I think that suits our skill set pretty well. And very often we'll do reacty things or view things on the front end as well to interact with it.
Yeah, nice, all custom stuff. So Rob says,
I think that's the great thing about WordPress, right? So isn't it? Because
Yeah.
everybody has the chance to do things in their own way that works for them, and you don't need to just follow one route and then that's it.
That's very true. Yeah. Rob says, yeah, it's features. So it was new things that he wanted to use. Okay, that's great. Good to know. And in reply, Nomad Skateboarding, nice, Rob. Your thoughts on the last podcast were really enjoyable. So Rob Cairns does a podcast. You can go and check it out, the SDM show. And obviously there was something in there on a recent episode. Was it about Kadence by any chance? If so, maybe go and check that out. That's cool. Thank you. Right, a couple of bits of errata. First one introduced by me. This is about the most annoying piece of news I can imagine. There's a beach near my house, which I go to all the time. I've got children. We're at this beach 10 times a year, at least, throwing rocks into the sea. And somebody this week or last week or whenever it was, found a massive dinosaur footprint on that beach. There it is. It's huge. It's about the size of my torso. And I'm just appalled that I am not the person who found this giant dinosaur footprint. Literally, there's a photo right at the bottom of this piece. There, that photo, I have sat exactly there dozens and dozens of times, literally there. And these two come along with their university degrees in archaeology, and they find I mean, look at it though. Look at that. There's just so obviously a footprint. Check it out. It's just so blatantly obvious. And anyway, I'm gutted. I thought it should have been me that found it, but
I think it's incredible. The size of it. It's got to be a fake, right? Surely.
No, it's real. It's Look at it. That's it.
Really?
That's it there. Yeah, they've dug it out. They've obviously, decided that it doesn't belong on the beach anymore, so people like me can't see it, and dug it up, brought it to some museum, and look at their smiley, happy faces. Should have been me.
I grew up on the Isle of Wight for a large part of my life. I often go back, and there's a lot of Jurassic stuff on the Isle of Wight, particularly down in Ventnor where the cliffs have fallen down, and they're always finding stuff down on the Isle of Wight. But I don't think I've ever found anything that big, because that is just immense.
If you go down to this beach, this is no word of a lie, and you go when the tide is out, you cannot not find fossils. If you can see, you find fossils, and you find them every 10 seconds. Normally they're about the size of your fist, like one of those. What are they called? The ones that they're a bit like a nautilus.
Swirly ones.
Yeah, the swirly ones. Yeah, exactly that. They're everywhere. They are literally everywhere. Every 2 steps that you take, there's another one. But the whole dinosaur foot, I'm not happy. I'm gonna. No. If I had a rewind time card, I would whip it out now and play it, and I would be the person discovering the dinosaur footprint. So I'm not at all happy about that. But let's return to sort of WordPressy stuff just to top off today's show. It's 29 minutes past. We've got 1 minute left. This is not from me. This is from Paul. This is a human-made piece. What's this about, Paul?
So at WordCamp Asia, there was a little meetup the day before WordCamp Asia. I believe I wasn't there, but I was watching it on Twitter, hosted by Human Made, with XWP and crowd favorite. And I just thought it was really interesting because obviously enterprise is a part of WordPress, but it's not something necessarily gets talked about in like widely, I guess. I think there's lots of different parts of WordPress, obviously, but I just thought it was really interesting that this took place, and the kind of conversations that are happening around collaboration on enterprise as kind of specific niche of WordPress. So it's something we're obviously interested in. It's something that we see and do a lot of, and I think it's really interesting seeing how WordPress is used in the enterprise space, which is more often than people think about it as being used. It is there. It is an important option when people are looking at what CMS they use, particularly when you head towards a recession. And people are going, well, I perhaps don't want to pay the license fees to these proprietary systems. What other options do I have? And with some of the things that WordPress has been on the journey of for the last couple of years, and some of the things in the future, like around collaboration, around multilingual, potentially going into core in future phases with the block editor, being more alike what you could see in things like Optimizely and Sitecore in terms of their block editors and personalization, which is a subject we talked about on the podcast.
Yeah,
it's a thing, and I think it's just really interesting that this happened, and the kind of things that people are talking about.
It happened on the 2nd of February 2023. So it was called Meet the Speakers WordPress Enterprise Gap Meetup. What I'll do is I will add that into the show notes, which get published tomorrow, along with the audio and video of this episode. But sadly, we've run out of time, so we're going to have to knock it on the head. I'm afraid I've got to go and collect my son. So otherwise, he's going to be, and it is actually chucking it down. So I'm going to be a bad dad unless I go and get him. Now, neither of you know this is about to happen, but every week we do this somewhat humiliating thing where I get everybody to raise their hands just like this, and we all do it at the same time. So yes, now go for it, Paul. Can you? Yes. And that's all it takes. And you're probably feeling I'm never, ever coming back after that humiliation. Thank you so much, Samantha. I really appreciate it. Thanks for contributing with us today. Here. Yeah, thank you. Hopefully when you get the invite on, you'll come back. And Paul, same to you. Really appreciate it. Look, no, there is. So I started this new bit of the show called What's Above Nathan's Head. And because I've got a shelf. But does anybody, I mean, it's so obvious this week, right? I just thought, as soon as I saw it, I thought it's too obvious. Let me just make, hang on, how do I make me, yeah, there you go. Okay, Mark, what is above Nathan's head? You've got 20 seconds to answer. You've got 20 seconds to answer. Let's see if you can do it. Let me just reduce that. What is it? What's above Nathan's head, Mark? There you go. All right. That's the new gimmick. He says it's a library. Yeah, I'll let you have that. It's books. It is books. Mark, for extra brownie points, name me one of the No. But it is, you're right. It's a library. Nomad Skateboarding says, I love the hands. I wonder, Mark. It was there's so many comments. Thank you, Mark. How to use WP Books is the name, apparently. Yes, it's a ChatGPT thing. We will go now because I'm going to get in trouble with my son, and I will see you all very soon. Take it easy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye.